Dr. Devi Shetty, the Chairman of the Board of Governors, Professor Rishikesh Krishna, the Director, other members of the Board of Governors, the faculty, students, the proud parents, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a great honor and privilege. I've heard a lot about the campus, and it's the first time I'm coming here, and I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing. It's truly a world-class campus, and I must congratulate everyone for it. Not only is it a milestone day for all of you, it's a milestone year for the Institute, and an institute which is celebrating 50 years is an institute which has obviously done a lot of things right and has gone from strength to strength. And I'm sure this institute will have many more milestones to celebrate, particularly because of the alumni that it has created over the last 50 years, and people like you who are going to go out there and do all of you proud and the institute proud. You know, when I'm invited for these convocation speeches and for convocations, it's an opportunity for me to really reflect on how the world has changed and how my life has changed since my convocation or since I passed out of business school, and obviously then subject you to the wisdom that I get from that reflection. So to me, when I look at how the world has changed in the last 36 years since I passed out of an MBA school, a lot has happened, and it's not so important what has happened in the last 36 years, but really what's going to happen over the course of the careers that all of you are embarking on after today. So I picked up 3 things, and we've discussed some of it even in the last couple of hours. First and foremost is, to me, the changing geopolitical landscape. You know, when I passed out of MBA school, or when I was in MBA school in 86, 88, I don't think we discussed China at all. China was not even on the radar, right? And the history of geopolitical change goes back centuries. But even more recently, a lot of the center of gravity of economic activity is shifted to Asia, started with Japan, and then what was then called the Asian Tigers, which was Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore. And then, of course, the other countries in Southeast Asia. But more recently, in the last 30, 35 years, China. Even I would say the last 25 years, because even in the 90s, none of us took China as seriously as we do today. And that has had a huge impact on industries, on supply chains, on geopolitics, on economics. And it has directly or indirectly affected pretty much anyone who's been in a professional environment over the last few decades. So the question is, how do you plan and prepare for changes like these? How do you see the opportunities and the challenges that these kind of changes bring about? And I think there all of you are lucky, because you're really passing out at a great time, because hopefully the next few decades will be more about India as much as the last few decades was about China. But having said that, I think there are a number of challenges that one has to deal with, and one should not take the success for granted. And China is not going anywhere. You know, we keep saying China slowed down, China is growing at 5%, but it's an $18 trillion economy. If it grows at 5%, it adds in India every 4 years, right? And so that's the size and scale of China. When the US grows at 3%, we get excited, saying it's a great growth. If European Union grows at 2%, we get excited. But we think when China grows at 5%, they're slowing down. Yes, compared to the 10% at which they were growing earlier. So China is not going to go anywhere. And I think if you look at what's really happening in China, they really want to dominate the technologies of the future, right? If you look at the work they're doing on climate change, on new energy vehicles, greening processes, it's amazing how much they've moved in the last few years. And if you read the latest issue of The Economist, it also talks about it being a big bet for Xi Jinping. So China is not going to go anywhere. India is going to have a great opportunity over the next few decades, and that creates opportunities for all of you. And there's another continent which I think you should not ignore, because that's going to emerge as well during this century, and that's Africa. Because in this century, there are going to be about 4 billion people added to the population of the world. From 7 billion, it's going to become 11 billion. And out of that 4 billion, 3 billion will be added in Africa, right? 1 billion will be added in Asia. And there's so little, many of us, at least I know about Africa. There's so few countries in Africa we visited. It's got one of the youngest demographics in the world. So if not during my lifetime, certainly during your lifetime, you will see the emergence of Africa, and Africa featuring in many conversations, just like China did and India will. So I think as you think about your futures, your professional careers, what you want to set out to do in your lives, keep looking at the geopolitical landscape and the changes that you will see happening over the years, and look at what does that mean to the careers that you are pursuing, the jobs that you're doing, the companies that you may be starting, the corporates that you may be working for, the social causes that you may be running with, so on and so forth. The second big change, which obviously is something Dr. Devi Shetty also talked about, is technology. I mean, it's not so far back in the 80s, when I was in IIM Calcutta, you just about had a computer center, which was, a few people went there. The rest of us went there because of the air conditioning and a nice place to hang out when it's too hot. But you really did not have a computer in your life. I mean, we had a couple of computers in the hostel, which was used more for playing a very popular game at that time called Pac-Man. So, it was just not there in your life. And look at how it has changed even in the last 2-3 decades. So while all of you are born into technology and are more technology savvy than many of us were when we were passing out of college, you don't need to learn technology. I think that's something that you're comfortable with. But technology itself is changing. Just before this, we had a conversation with the faculty and we were discussing how AI will change educational institutions, how AI will change professions. And AI will change a lot of things. AI will destroy a lot of jobs. AI will create a lot of jobs. AI will disrupt a lot of industries, just like computers have. When I joined Tata Steel in '88, the whole conversation was about computerization. Those days, the public sector banks were going on strike. But Bangalore was created on the back of technology. The companies, iconic companies who came up here, came on the basis of that, right? So there will be many millions of people have joined the tech sector over the last 2-3 decades because of technology. And I'm sure there will be as many opportunities as there are disruptions. So technology is, again, a very important part of the next few decades. And the question is, how do you keep adapting yourself to technology? In some sense, like computers and the internet disrupted the last 30 years of our lives, AI is going to disrupt the next 20, 30 years of your lives. And I think, as Dr. Devi Shetty said, how can you keep current? How can you keep adapting and changing? The third area is something which did not impact us as much, but is starting to impact us and will certainly impact you, is sustainability and climate change. Right? Sustainability is not a new subject. I mean, climate change may be, but sustainability is not a new subject. I work with the Tata Group, and while it was not called sustainability, but the philosophy of having inclusive growth, taking society along, has been part of the philosophy of the Tata Group ever since the founder, J.N. Tata, said very famously that the community is not just another stakeholder, but the very purpose of our existence. He said this more than 130 years back, right? And not only did he say it, I know some of you know Jamshedpur, and I've worked with Tata Steel here. But Jamshedpur as a city was set up because in the late 1800s, most of the industrial cities in UK were like slums, because you had factories and you had workers coming from the countryside and nowhere to live, and it was one big slum, whether it was Manchester, Liverpool, all these cities of the Industrial Revolution, right? So the objective was to create a city which would not be a slum. And that's what Jamshedpur is. So at that time, he was criticized for saying, why do you spend so much money building houses for workers? But the whole concept was, how can you take the community along? How can you take the society along? How can you create a dignified quality of life for people who are coming to work in the factory, right? So it's not a new subject, but I think what is sustainability, and a more specific or subset of it is climate change, and how do corporates not ignore society? How do corporates build trust with society? How do corporates get the social license to operate? These are the questions which need to be answered, and climate change is here and now. I think we're experiencing it. We spent a long time debating that it's a problem. Then we spent a long time figuring out what are the targets we should chase. Now we are coming to the heavy end of the journey, which is the execution of it. And the cost and complexity of the execution is being underestimated across the world. We have operating units in Netherlands and in UK which are going through this transformation. And it's a huge challenge because there's a lot of money involved. Somebody has to pay for it. Customers have to pay for it. The industry has to pay for it. The governments have to pay for it. Taxpayers are asking, why should I pay for the industry to make a change? There are others who are saying that your jobs are not as important as our health, so decarbonization means deindustrialization, so on and so forth. So it's a big issue. And today, even in Europe, there are people who are winning elections based on whether they're pro-climate change or anti-climate change. But this is a subject which is going to create industry, create jobs, destroy jobs, reconstruct value chains, and create a lot of disruption, not only in your professional lives, but also in your personal lives because of the impact of climate change that all of us will experience over the next few decades. So I think this is going to be a big subject which certainly is going to impact any industry, whether you're in manufacturing or not, you will see this. Even reporting. I mean, increasingly annual reports will have both financial and non-financial metrics to report. Investors are looking at your track record. There is this huge political issue of climate justice, the global north versus the global south. Who pays for it? How do you make sure that there's more equitable and inclusive growth or inclusive transition? So I think this is a big subject which is going to play out over the next few decades, and I think it's something which all of you as young professionals need to keep an eye out for in how it's going to directly or indirectly impact your careers. So these to me are the three big things which have played out over the last few decades: the geopolitical landscape, the shifting of the geopolitical landscape, technology and its evolution over the last few decades and over its next few decades, and climate change, a more recent kind of challenge that we've been dealing with. So apart from the external factors which are going to impact you, like I said, directly or indirectly, the question is also what is it that you can do as individuals? I think Dr. Devi Shetty talked about how can you prepare yourself for a life which is not going to be perfect, for a life which will have disappointments, for a life which will have failures, right? How do you prepare yourself for it, right? And I think there are three things which, again, I want to leave with you as, at least from what I have learned and picked up from my experience, which is very important. You know, so far your education has been of a certain type, right? And it's because you're smart and intelligent that you're sitting where you are today, right? So there's no doubting that, there's no questioning that. But that's one type of education. For your success henceforth, you need that, but you need more than that. And one of the most important things that is required is your ability to learn from the experiences that you will have. Because that's going to be your education over the next few decades, right? It's about multiple people go through the same experiences and learn different things. It's about learning from failures, how do you deal with failures. It's from being able to handle stresses. It's also about the ability to handle successes, right? And how do you reflect? How do you reflect to learn from what you've experienced? How do you use that learning to keep improving yourself? I think that's very, very important, and really that's something you will learn only through experience, right? It's not something someone can teach you so easily. You may listen to a lot of people giving you advice on it, but ultimately it's about how you reflect on yourself, how do you detach yourself from what you're going through, how do you pick up the learnings from that and use that to keep improving yourself. I think this, to me, how you do it is going to determine how happy you are, how successful you are over the next few decades. The second part, which again a business school doesn't do justice to, or your education so far would not have done justice to, is how do you handle people, right? And people are not perfect, all of us are not, none of us are perfect. How do you deal with people who may be above you, your bosses, your peers, the politics of the office, your team members? How do you deal with people in your personal life? So far you've been dealing with parents, you'll get married, spouses, children, relatives, friends, and it's not easy. And there's no one size fits all, there's no one prescription I can give you. But again, this is something that you pick through experience. But it's very important. How do you connect with people? Okay? to me, one of the skills that we don't have or we have less of, the more successful we are, is the ability to listen, right? How do you build that ability to listen? The more intelligent we are, the more successful we are, we tend to listen less, right? So how do you get that ability to listen? Because that listening is a starting point of building a connect with people. And beyond listening is also, and listening is not just about listening to what that person is saying. Listening is about feeling the feelings. Listening is about sensing the body language. So as much as a video call is very effective, but there is oftentimes a value in physically meeting somebody, because there's so many data points you pick out of sitting in the same room with someone, which you can't pick out from a video screen, right? So I think the ability to listen, the ability to use that ability to listen to translate into investing in that relationship, building trust, building credibility. It's about doing what you say you will do, and eventually building authenticity, because that's the foundation on which you will build relationships, both in your personal lives and your professional lives. And your ability to do that will also have a huge impact on how you lead your life going forward, both in the professional space and in the personal space. And you will deal with a lot of people who are difficult to deal with, who don't need to listen to you, but you need to get work done through them. And there will be many stakeholders. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll have investors, you'll have customers, you have suppliers, you'll have employees. So I think this is the second thing which comes from being out there and learning from the experiences you have. And the third, and to me it's a very important thing, is also to be passionate about whatever you're doing. Because to be successful, you need to put in a lot of hard work. And to put in a lot of hard work, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. And you may not know today what you're really passionate about, because sometimes there's a journey of discovery in discovering what your passions truly are. What is the kind of job that truly excites you? What is the kind of company that you truly want to work for or create? You know, what is the kind of work? It may be social work, it may be creative work, it may have nothing to do with corporate life, but that may be your passion, right? So I think it's very important to do things that you're passionate about, because then nobody has to tell you to work hard. You don't feel any stress from working hard. Excellence is something that you can pursue because you're passionate about doing it. And that makes sure, because a career or a professional life is ahead of you. And Dr. Devi Shetty talked about purpose. So oftentimes you say, okay, I'll make a lot of money and then I'll retire. Then you realize you don't have a purpose, right? So that purpose may not be working. Purpose may be doing something good for the society. But that purpose is what drives you. And that purpose means you want to be active as long as you can. So to me, the ability to learn from experiences, the ability to deal with people, and doing something which you're passionate about is, I think, very, very critical to having a long and successful career ahead. And finally, before I end, I want to share a quote which this famous American poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou famously said. Ultimately, people will not remember what you said, people will not remember what you did, people will remember how you made them feel. So go out there, do yourself proud, do your parents proud, and do your institute proud. All the very best.